In today's gospel, Jesus calls us to be vigilant, to stay awake. Why is this so important to Jesus? Before we can answer the question, we first of all have to come to an understanding of what does to stay awake mean. In the biblical sense, it does not mean that we are to survive on 3 hours of sleep a night, or we are to drink all sorts of Mountain Dew with its caffeine to keep us awake. The Greek word that is used in Scripture that we translate as to stay awake can also be translated as to stay alive. God did not intend for us to live our lives bouncing from one crisis to another, from one situation to another. God did not intend our lives to be lived in mindless routine. God did not intend us to live our lives taking all sorts of time and energy for things that are really insignificant. That's why Jesus calls us to be vigilant, to stay awake, to stay alive, to live life more deeply, more fully. And when we do so, we can bring out from life the many joys and blessings of our God. So how does one live life more deeply? 2,400 years ago, the Greek philosopher Socrates taught his students that an unexamined life is a life not worth living. Thousands of years ago, Socrates realized that living is not simply doing, but rather living is reflecting and examining what we do, why we do it, and what we should do. Socrates realized that when our lives are busy, when our lives get chaotic, when we struggle, when we are distracted, the first thing to go from our life is taking time to examine what is going on in our lives. And when we don't examine what is going in our lives, eventually our lives will seem to be empty and without purpose or meaning. So how can you and I, as Christians, examine our lives? Through prayer. Prayer is the way that you and I can examine what we do, why we do it, and what we should do. Now, I want to make a clarification when I'm talking about prayer. For many people, when they hear us say we are to be people who pray, they think we're telling people that you have to say lots and lots of prayers. Now, I'm not against saying prayers, so don't get me wrong. I don't want anybody to go home and text their friend saying, I can't believe what Father John said. No. I believe in saying prayers. But if all we do is simply say prayers, then what we're doing is simply doing prayers. Well, maybe not praying. And so when Jesus calls us to pray, he's inviting us to reflect upon what we do, why we do it, in the context of our relationship with God and our relationship with one another. And it's not easy to do that kind of reflective prayer. It's much easier for all of us, including myself, to say prayers. Check it off my list, and go on with life. It's much more difficult to sit and reflect and meditate and contemplate. Where is God in this situation? What does God want me to do? How does God want me to do it? And see, the more that you and I become people who reflect, who examine our lives, the more we become that vigilant, that watchful servant. And the more we become vigilant and watchful in our relationship with God and each other, we also become, as we heard in today's gospel, that faithful and prudent servant. That servant who realizes that God is always in our midst, always calling us to be more than we can be. And then we discover that the talents and the time and the abilities we have are blessings. Blessings to share with others, to help them grow more in love with the God who created us all. When we don't take time to reflect, when we're not watchful and vigilant, when we don't live life deeply, we can easily become like that other servant in today's gospel. That servant who ever thought that living life fully was doing your own thing. That life is all about me, my wants, my desires, my whims, my wishes. Listen to him. My master's delayed in coming. I'll eat. I'll drink. I'll get drunk. He's only concerned about himself. And the more he's more concerned about himself, the other becomes things. Things he can use, ignore, or abuse. We were not called to be that kind of servant. We were called to be servants who are vigilant, who are watchful, who are reflective. As we continue in our celebration of Mass today, let us take time to ask God for the grace to become more reflective. I'm going to give you a little task to do today. Sometime today, I want you to just take 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, ask yourself this question. What are 3 things I am thankful for? And then as you think of those 3 things, reflect upon how perhaps God has brought someone special into your life, given you an opportunity to serve others in a unique and wonderful way, or you simply become aware of God's tremendous power and grandeur and beauty in the world in which we live. If it works today, I invite you to do it tomorrow.